Welcome to Season 2 of Coming Home to Ourselves, where we aim to bridge the gap between the sacred and modern-day responsibilities, barriers, and life. I am Denise Alyssa, your host, channel, mystic, and guide, and I aim to empower you to become your own self-healer and an embodied co-creator of your life, supporting you in shedding what no longer serves and aligning you with your most authentic and connected version of self. Please note that I am not a medical professional and nothing said in this podcast should be misconstrued as medical advice or replacement of such. If you'd like to know more about my background, training, or the workshops, ceremonies, or other work I offer, please visit www.denisealyssa.com. Hi, friends. Thank you for being here. I'm so excited for this conversation with our guest today. We have Eileen, who is a midwife turned slow living witch, blending neuroscience and woo to guide you home to your body and the earth. And Eileen, I have to tell you that when I read that intro and your bio in general, I felt like I was being called home. Like just in those words alone, it really aligned so deeply with what I've come to believe and with the practices that align for me in my health and my work and how far I've come in my body and in my growth and in coming home to myself from originally someone who could not sit alone with myself at all. So with all of that, to read somebody else describe their truth in that way that aligns so strongly, it makes you feel like you're not alone. You know, it was really beautiful. So I'm so happy to have you here.
I'm so happy to be here. I think that resonance was there right from the beginning. I can't even remember how I came across your podcast, but the title was like, well, I clearly need to talk to her. That's a space that needs to happen, a conversation that needs to happen. I'm so pleased to be here.
Oh, thank you. I love that. I was just thinking, like, leading up to earlier today, preparing for this, thinking, I really think like it's divine intervention that brings me my guests, right? And to have them be so in alignment with my work when, you know, I don't know about you, but for myself, a lot of my journey has felt like I'm the only one, you know, or that there's like only a few of us doing this work. What I've really come to discover is that there's a lot of us, but they're all around the world, right? Like they're scattered. And so through these conversations, being able to connect with and meet and have these really like raw, authentic conversations with other people who are in alignment with what I do, with what they do, you know, it all meshes so well, is been really beautiful, really transformative for me, even just to recognize, oh, like, thank God I'm not the only one.
Yeah. I feel like it's the most beautiful thing about this journey of coming home to ourselves, and then to take that a step further into a path where we're supporting other folks coming home to themselves, is that we are creating the community that we felt like we needed or that we wish we had.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you for that. Like, you took the words right out of my mouth. That's exactly what a lot of my goals throughout the different areas of this work that I have done is to build that community. And now I know that I personally was leading some in-person sacred circles and attempting to build that community locally to me. And I've taken a shift in that to doing more online stuff. But I know that you do some work in person and virtual where you are doing some really powerful community building there.
Yeah. I do several, I've got like tiers of community building, I guess, if you will, but I hold ceremony hybrid whenever I hold ceremony. So I cycle through the wheel of the year, the 8 celebrations that mark those turns of the season and the midway points. And those ceremonies are both in person and online because, as you said, we're everywhere. We're not just localized. And it's been really beautiful to be able to offer that connection of coming together in person for those who are able and need that space, and also to be able to include the community that is further afield and or has kids and can't make it to something at 7 p.m. on a Friday or whatever it might be. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I'm so grateful for every person doing this work, honestly. I just think that as we do this work, as we heal ourselves, we heal the planet, is what I'm always saying, right? As we heal ourselves, we heal each other. And I think that the more people showing up authentically and in their hearts, from their heart space, right? Not from a sense of ego or power or control, but truly from their heart space and that sense of like divine love and divine compassion and showing up and holding and creating this space for other people. It shows others that you can. It kind of like it creates that path. And actually, maybe I'll read that sentence that I just read to you. It's so funny. So I was just pulling cards leading up to this podcast recording because I like to just kind of feel into things, and the cards were really calling me to them today. So I did that, and I never know exactly what's going to come from these conversations, right? But the sentence or two sentences that came to me through these cards as I read them and reflected on who you are and the brief conversation that we have had previously, I thought, yeah, the cards have done it again. Of course, they're like spot
Of course
on,
they have.
right?
That's what they do.
So for our listeners, I will share it. It was reconnecting with our roots, the earth and the wholeness of who we truly are and our beautiful uniqueness, claiming who we are at our core, walking in our truth to blaze a trail filled with potency and magic for others to walk in theirs. And I think that's what you're doing through those communities.
Oh, right? This just feels like this beautiful extension of a conversation that I just had inside of one of those communities. I run a 6-week course called Unleash Your Inner Witch. Yep. And at the end of the 6 weeks, we come together one more time for like a 7th week just to connect and to share what came up for us and where we're going. And it that sense that comes through every time, that the most impactful piece for everyone is always that space to show up, to be witness, to not have to share unless that's what you're feeling, but to feel comfortable just being in those spaces of community, to be seen, to be understood, to be recognized, and that sense of coming back into our roots and like, that ancient connection to land and lineage that many of us in North America, so-called North America, often feel the disconnect from.
Yeah, I agree. And that's such a dishonoring of ourselves and of the earth and of our own power, right? To be so disconnected from the earth and from universal energy and from nature. We are nature, right? We're not separate from it. We are nature. And so I love the work that you're doing, that cyclical work, and just aligning with those cycles and embracing them and allowing ourselves to be held by those cycles is something that I think our society is really lacking. So do you want to speak a little bit to that? Like, what does that mean to you to be cyclical living and to embrace that holistic style that honors kind of all of your parts?
Yeah, I would love to speak to that. I encountered the idea of cyclical living almost by accident. I remember a few years back around the spring equinox, this little something in the back of my head was like, I think there's this word ostera that is another word for the equinox. And I kind of went down this rabbit hole of, oh yeah, there's this whole calendar that modern day pagans and Wiccans follow, but that really harkens back to a much more ancient way of moving in cycle with the seasons that our ancestors intimately knew and had to be in alignment with, because they depended on the land in a way that we don't anymore. We do, but we don't. We're, again, separated from it. And I started learning about, the Celtic lineage that is my own lineage, and that the names for those seasonal shifts and what it meant to my ancestors there, and this way of allowing ourselves permission to have an experience of all 4 seasons of energy, instead of being in this perpetual spring, summer, plant harvest energy that our culture, the overculture, would like us to participate in, just continually producing and continually reaping the products of our production, and this really extractive way of being in the world that is leading to mass burnout in humans, and a planet that's on the brink of not being able to sustain us because we've forgotten how to autumn and we've forgotten how to winter. And so bringing that remembrance into our lives and allowing for those slower seasons of introspection and of more rest and dreaming. And it doesn't always align with the external season, but when I first started, it really was about like, okay, how do I live in alignment with the energies? And even just letting myself sleep in for an extra half hour, 45 minutes in the winter and not feeling guilty about it was a huge shift.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I actually just yesterday, it is funny how these recordings align with our lives outside of them, right? Just yesterday, I was talking to a friend who she's like dipped her toe in the water. She's not as fully embracing this style of living yet. And she has come to a few of my sacred ceremonies, like spring equinox and full moon ceremonies and things like that. But she's kind of just dipping her toe in, and she's a go-getter, right? She's like that typical kind of really, like, I'm just watching her thinking like, man, how long till you burn out? And how do I stop it? How do I save you? Do you know what I mean? And she's reading the book Wintering right now. And so she was messaging me about it the other day. I think you'd love this book. And we were discussing it a little bit. And I said to her, I think that that's going to be the story of our century, how everybody, you said, like, we're just in this mass burnout. And I believe it. The patients that I work with too, we see that over and over and over again, where this society, this modern day living, like, forces you into this like massive level of burnout where a lot of people don't recover. A lot of people don't come out of it because society is still operating that way. And for them to take such a massive transformative shift to be able to step into a slower way, it's the other way that productivity equals self-worth is so deeply ingrained in them. In most of us, it was so deeply ingrained in me that to step away from that is terrifying and completely unknown, right? And so I just think that we are starved of these types of conversations, right? I can't take credit for that sentence. I heard somebody else say that the other day after one of my recordings, and I thought, oh my God, yes, we are so starved of these conversations. And the more of these conversations we have, I hope, I pray that we give more and more people permission to step into that, to really align with themselves and to slow down and to build that safety. Like, so what was that like for you to build that safety in your nervous system to take those steps to slow down? Because I think that's what stops a lot of people, right? They only feel safe when they are going, when they are avoiding, when they are moving, when they are doing. And I think to take that radical, let's face it, it is radical at this stage of our society, that radical step to slow down, to tune inwards, to connect with nature in that cyclical way. What came up for you?
Ooh, I mean, what's still coming up for me?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It continues to be work and a journey. I think part of why I talk about it incessantly and have created these communities where we can practice slowing down together is because I still need that support, because it is scary. And certainly I think a lot of unpacking of, what was coming up for me when I would be still or be quote unquote unproductive, and making the commitment to be with it and simply observe it and maybe get curious and write about or journal about, what is coming up? What are these lies that I've believed my whole life? What conditioning has led me to this place where I don't embody my inherent worth? My brain wrapped around the concept pretty quickly. I read a lot of books that really helped me get there, like Laziness Does Not Exist and How to Do Nothing and Burnout and Rest is Resistance, and all these beautiful authors doing a lot of the thought work around this that helped my rational brain get on board. And my body still struggles sometimes, if I'm being completely honest.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
I do. And thank you for being so honest, because I think that authenticity is what invites other people to trust you and to believe you and to think she's still struggling with it, but maybe I can take a step too, right? And maybe there is no end goal, right? I always think there's this healing work, it comes in layers, it comes in cycles. I view it as a spiral, always coming back to the same things from a different lens, a different version of self, a different viewpoint, to be able to perceive it and to move through it and to heal it in different ways, right? And so it's not linear. There's no like, if I just race through this, I'll get to the end and then I get to live this like happy and healed life. Like this, that's our soul's evolution is just that constant cycle of healing and growth and exactly that, evolution. So I don't think we have to be there now.
And yet we're fed this story that we should be, right? There's the urgency of our culture is such that there's a part of our bodies that believes, because it's been awash in this story from the time we were born, from before then, that our worth is measured by our productivity or our usefulness to others, that more is better, that faster is better, that there is some arbitrary finish line that we can get to, and then we get to be happy, or then we get to relax and slow down, or then we get to have that life we've been dreaming of. And I love that metaphor of the spiral that you used, because again, cyclical living, time is not linear, all of it. The image that comes to mind is that Celtic spiral that really does, if you trace it, it goes in. And then when you get to the middle, there's another path that comes right back out. And then there's that triple spiral image of like, yes, coming back in from a different angle, but it's always like a breathing of a journey instead of this like up the hill mountain kind of metaphor we've been given.
Yeah. And I think when you're really attuned to that and aware of it, you start to see it, right? You start to see, oh, I've been here before. And how did I do it last time? And does that still work for me now? Does that align for me now? Did it align for me then, right? Was I acting from love back then, or was I acting from fear and ego? And then you get to the opportunity to revisit it and say, oh, that's not how I want to do things anymore. And I'm going to do it differently this time, right? So, you just mentioned that we're so deeply ingrained with this idea that we can do it all and that there's this urgency. And what brought to mind for me is that a lot of your work is for female identifying folks. And there's, again, this conversation's been coming up in other episodes and in my personal life as well. But as a female identifying person, we are really taught that we can do it all and that we should do it all.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Like your grandmother couldn't even have a bank account, or whatever, your great grandma could not even have a bank account in her name and had to rely on a man for everything. And you now get to work You get to have a bank account. You get to take care of the finances if you want to. You also get to have children. You get to have children and work. And it's like we're expected to work like we don't have kids and parent like we don't have a job and partner romantically as if we don't have either, you know? And so how does this show up in your work? Because I think I sense that there's probably a connection there between you working mainly with female identifying people and the style of work that you do.
Yeah, I was literally just writing about this yesterday, this definition of success and how women's empowerment has added to our plates without taking anything off of it. It's like you can have it all and do it all and be it all as though we're some superhuman with infinite capacity. And then tied with that mother martyr, right? The self-sacrificing, selfless woman is the ideal, the epitome of womanhood. And so it really comes into play in my work in a lot of deconditioning from the worthiness is tied to how much we are of use to others around us, how much we can do. It comes into play with a lot of boundary work and practicing, embodying, being okay with doing less, being okay with the feelings of guilt that come up when we do start to decouple and to say no and to set boundaries and to take care of ourselves. I feel like it's a topic that we just speak to over and over and over of you are allowed. It's that permission piece that you mentioned, right? Like you are allowed to slow down. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to take care of yourself. And the creation of community space where women can share together their experience of practicing that and how uncomfortable it is and of falling out of that practice again and again, because it happens. You know, we do this thing that is new and foreign and uncomfortable, and we have to do it many times before we get to the point where it becomes natural. But just having that space where we can share the triumphs and how good it has felt for, you know, that aha or the light bulb moment when a client of mine is like, oh my gosh, I asked to have my needs met and they were met. Like it wasn't a big deal. Or I feel closer to my partner, or, you know, there's that lifting of the weight. It's why I do the work. And having community space where those kinds of wins and the trials as well can be shared, again, makes us feel not so alone. Because on top of a burnout pandemic, we're in a loneliness epidemic. And having those connective spaces makes the journey easier, at least a little bit.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm just sitting with that. Yeah, it's a lot, right? Because we're up against like the entirety of societal programming when we make these changes. So not only are we saying, hey, this way of living doesn't work for me anymore, and I need to make some changes for myself, but everyone around us tends to often have like this resistance to those changes because that's not the way things have been done, right? That's just not the way it's meant to be. And as we change, it forces the other people in our lives to also kind of reroute or reevaluate. And that's not on purpose, you know, like me changing my way of being to align better for me isn't about you, right? Isn't about my partner or my family or whoever it may be in my peripheral or like the characters that play roles in my life. But it impacts them because now the dynamic has changed. And so as we take those steps, I think we're up against a lot.
Yeah, it is the hardest part of behavior, belief, everything change is often that those around us may resist it as much or more than we resist it ourselves. And that piece, especially for those of us who have been people pleasers and have put others ahead of ourselves our whole lives, if we start to say, oh, actually, no, I can't, we might come up against some people who are like, but you've always done this for me. Why aren't you doing it for me now? Right? We do meet some very real resistance. One of the things I find for myself and for my clients. And it doesn't work with everyone because there are people out there who will never understand and won't be able to. But explaining the why is so impactful. If we're the way that we're moving in the world, especially for those closest to us who love us the most, if we can explain to them why it's important that we set a boundary, that we say no to a thing we might have once said yes to, that we are shifting the way we're moving, that is usually enough to get the people who genuinely love and care for us on board. They may not fully understand, but having that powerful why is a really potent tool to help lower the resistance that we're receiving from other people.
Yeah, it's interesting for me to hear that, because in a lot of the work I do with complex chronic disease patients, obviously they've been pushed to like the brink of breaking, right? Like to that burnout to such a degree that their body is now resisting everything. And obviously that's a simplified way of describing it, but that's like the theme that we see in almost all of them, is this deep burnout, and they'll see the decline, right? They'll see that what I'm doing is causing me to continue to decline, and my baseline is declining. And the doctor that I work with, he always says, you know, when you meet me, you're usually declining, and my goal is to get you to plateau, and then from there we want you to raise your baseline. But we have to stop that decline first. And what I have personally experienced and what I've seen in a lot of other people is that they explain the why and nobody believes them, right? And then when you bring in factors like children and family, you know, like for myself, when my body came out of remission, I was pregnant. And so I then went through a very traumatic birth, and then had this infant that I was responsible for, and I had come out of remission. So my body was in that decline, right? And everybody around me just thought, oh, it's postpartum, it'll level, you know what I mean? And we have a lot of neurodivergence in the family that also nobody recognized or believed, and
Right.
think, you know, there was this big pattern of just not believing, right? And I was responsible for this infant 6 days a week by myself overnight. She didn't sleep for 3 years. So, you know, what would you tell somebody who's living in that right now? Like, I know looking back, I made choices that kept our family together, but cost me my health.
Right.
And my family knows that now too. Lots of conversations have happened around this since then. We've come a long way, and everybody has a different understanding now. But that's what happened in the simplest form, right? And we didn't have the resources to make the changes that needed to be made in order to save my health, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately, like, choices were made. And so I know looking back, I could have set stronger boundaries. I could have said, no, this is just no longer an option. And instead, it was like I was always waiting for permission, right? I was like, this is what I really need, and this is why I can't do it anymore, and I can't do it anymore. And I would like beg and plead for somebody to say, okay, here's what we're going to do instead. But I never said, this is just flat out no longer an option, otherwise I have to leave, right?
Yeah. And that's the scariest, that is one of the scariest things, to have to be in a place where that is the decision, right? Either this behavior shifts or I leave. And it's like, you kind of feel like you have to put your money where your mouth is if things don't shift.
And the truth is, everyone was doing the best they could. Do you know what I mean? Like, we have a family dynamic that required my husband to be gone a lot of the time because he made the money, and we have a blended family, and there was a lot of factors. It wasn't like he's out at the bar.
Yeah.
Everybody was stretching themselves.
Yeah.
To what, and it still wasn't enough. Like, that's just the reality. It wasn't enough to stop my health from declining. And I ended up fully bedridden, unable to speak, unable to eat, requiring full-time care. I could not care for my daughter by myself at all. And I literally needed help to like get out of bed into the bathroom and back.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so when you don't put in those supports or those boundaries ahead of time, that's what happens for a lot of the patients that I'm working with is they literally get to that point where, well, you didn't have the resources before to put in place, but what the hell are you going to do now? That you actually cannot physically care for yourself at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I don't have a easy answer to that at all, but what's coming up in my mind is this sense of, as holders of spaces like this, as people who are walking with those who are recognizing that they need to make a change, how do we help folks see that truly when you're between a rock and a hard place and you literally can't take care of yourself, things get figured out, right? And so it's how do we create spaces where, yes, it doesn't feel like the resources are there, but we are always in some choice. I am not a spiritual bypasser. I'm not going to like put a silver lining on a shit situation. And sometimes it's helpful to say, okay, what if tomorrow you couldn't literally get out of bed without help? What would you do? And so what can you do now? It might not feel great. It might be really hard, but what can you do now so that you don't get to that point? And it's always going to be an individual basis. And it's so hard, hard. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, we all learned from mine.
Yeah.
I knew what was happening while it was happening. So that was a really hard thing. Mm-hmm. Because I had been there before, and because I was doing this work and I had the you know what I mean? I had that knowing.
Yeah.
But the people in my life, they hadn't experienced that yet. They didn't really understand. But I told exactly what you just said, right? Like, how do we get to the point where people recognize, okay, if I'm really between a rock and a hard place, if I really wake up tomorrow and like cannot get out of bed, cannot walk by myself, cannot whatever, things get figured out. So how do we figure that out before we get there? Mm-hmm. And I think that's the goal with stepping into some of these conversations and with this idea of cyclical living, is that you're already putting those preventions in place. This is preventative medicine.
Yes, it is. And it is that, I think it's also that permission that we need so often to start putting that prevention in place. We were, talking about how do we do this thing that feels so hard to do, even in your boundary setting, that sense of needing permission. Again, if we've been good girls our whole life, we feel like we need permission. And for me, having that mirror of nature, knowing that nature takes a break and rests, felt like permission. Knowing that in this kind of this Celtic worldview that I move with, the new day begins when the sun goes down, felt like permission to rest, to make that a priority, to feel as though actually that's the most important part. Is that slowing? Is that softening? Is that going inward? And then cultivating like little simple tools, right? Our lives are full. We're overwhelmed. We're busy. Little reminders of the rest in every exhale, and the allowing for a few moments of, the word that came to mind was like going fallow, like letting a field be fallow, right? Letting it take a break for a season. Moments where we're not constantly consuming is important. Or always, you go for a walk and you listen to a podcast and you fold the laundry and you've got an audiobook running that you're trying to listen to, and knowledge is amazing, and we're so overloaded with stimuli constantly that even just allowing ourselves to be bored or in silence when we're doing things that we're going to do otherwise, chores and stuff, I think there's value there.
I totally agree. I keep getting pulled back to the conversation we were just having because I feel like I would be amiss to leave out this one part. But then I really want to go into what you just said of this slowing down and allowing ourselves to be bored. One of the, and you can tell me if you agree or not, but one of the big factors I think is really crucial when we do catch ourselves, when we do realize, oh, I did not live in alignment with what I needed. I knew I needed to slow down and I didn't. And I was begging for somebody to give me permission, and I was asking for help and it wasn't there. And nobody was believing me for the severity of the circumstances. And that is all true. But I think healing from that, because now, okay, that happened, right? We can't go back and change it. So where do we go from here? We can still lean into that cyclical living from here. We can still lean into that slowing down, or that being held, or that being supported from here. We don't have to stay there, right? And I think for myself, one of the big steps that I needed to take in that was to take radical responsibility for the choices that I did and didn't make in that time, right? And like I said, I made choices that kept our family together but cost me my health. And I don't know if I regret that.
Yeah.
Like I kept our family together. I kept my stepson supported in the way that he needed at the time. I kept my partner doing the things that he needed to do at the time. And that's on me to take that responsibility for those choices that I did and didn't make. And that's not bypassing their responsibility. They have a role in this too, right? Every character who plays a role in your life has a role in a lot of these circumstances, and that's for them to take responsibility for. But I think it's important not to just sit in that space of nobody believed me and nobody listened to me and nobody, and I begged for help and nobody gave it to me. Like, that's true. And that sacred right? That powerful sacred that is true. And it is on me to take responsibility for the choices that I did and didn't make, the things I did and didn't say, the amount of energy I spent begging other people to listen to me instead of just standing in my power.
Yeah. As soon as you started speaking to this, I was like, it is this sense of there's this victimhood that can happen. And something that just came to me is this sense of so often as women, as caregivers, we disempower our people, our partners, our children, our friends, our family, because we're doing for them. And in a lot of ways that disempowers us, because when we need, we feel like, well, why isn't anyone helping me? I'm saying what I need and I'm not getting it. And so taking that radical responsibility, being able to compassionately look at our choices, take ownership of them, forgive ourselves if we don't like them, in a way is also that first step toward empowering others too. If I'm fully responsible for myself, and yes, we need community and kinship and support, that we are social animals, we definitely need that. And at the end of the day, only you can be responsible for you, and only your partner can be responsible for themselves. And, young children being a bit of an exception in that they
of course
need us a lot more. But as adults, there is that responsibility. And sometimes it's way easier to play the victim and to feel like, woe is me. But we can't create change from that place.
Exactly.
As much as we'd like to.
Exactly. And it's not to bypass the pain that brings, like the pain and the grief and the, and the disempowerment and everything that whole process brings to anyone and brought to me is valid and needs to be felt and needs to be honored and processed in the way that it needs to be processed. And we can do that in a way that empowers ourselves and takes radical responsibility for our role in things, while recognizing that the other people were up against a rock and a hard place too. You know what I mean? That certain characters, were genuinely doing the best that they could from where they were at that time. And that's not on us to change that, right? So we don't have to like blame or victim, not victimize, but like they're the
bad guy, demonize.
The bad guy. Yeah, that's right. That's what I'm trying to come up with the words. That they're the bad guy. Yeah. And that we're the victim. Like that disempowers everybody. Yeah. And not only that, it doesn't honor anyone's experience in that either. Right?
Yeah. And it's interesting because as you're saying that, the other thing that I think I've found myself dancing in conversation around this in larger spheres as well, is a sense of honoring that somebody's doing the best they can with what they have. Doesn't mean you're giving them a free pass, right? It doesn't mean you're condoning the way that they're behaving or how they behaved, but it means accepting and understanding, because you can't change it.
Yeah.
Only they can choose to change it.
And
being in that place of being hateful or really upset and like banging your head against it, it only keeps you in discomfort.
I find that really empowering too, when we really have the ability to step into that state of like divine love and view every person in the circumstance through that state of divine love, and then go, you know, I honor that you were doing the best you could for the circumstances that you were, and you've chosen not to grow. And you've chosen not to learn from this. And you've chosen to stay exactly as you are. And I'm going to believe you this time that you are this person, that this is how you're choosing to show up at this time. And if this is a repeated cycle, that empowers us to say, I love you, and you need to be placed into a further category in my life.
Yeah.
Which you can no longer be in the circle of people that I rely on, that I turn to in times of challenge.
Yeah. And that's the hard part about stepping into your power and learning how to set true boundaries, where it's those non-negotiables, is that we will have to move people to further out circles. It happens. And it feels crappy in the moment and sometimes ongoing, but the overall kind of benefit to our lives and our ability to be held and supported and at peace is worth the initial discomfort.
I also think it honors everybody involved. I think it allows me to love you for where you are able to be right now. And it allows me to love you safely. Because if I keep you here and you're not able to show up for me in the way that I need from that inner circle, then I'm resentful. Then I'm angry. Then I'm criticizing you and I'm judging you for just being who you are at this time. Right? But when I can say, I love you and I need to place you over here for now until you show me otherwise, that lets me love you.
Yeah, that's that acceptance piece. Right? That, I'm no longer, if you place them that little bit further away, you're no longer needing them for things they can't give. And so that resentment can go away. You can accept the parts that are still valuable in your life and not feel like you're just fighting this part of them that isn't there or that doesn't match what you need.
It keeps me safe, it keeps you safe, and it lets me love you for exactly who you are right now. And I think that in the work you do, there must be a lot of boundary setting.
Yes, there is lots, for sure. It comes up in circle, it comes up in one-on-one, that navigating how to have those conversations, I think, is one of the things that we do a lot of. I love being able to help my clients find the words that feel safe to use to navigate those conversations.
I love that.
Yeah. It's something that I feel like even as a younger person, I have this perspective often on like the bigger picture and both sides. I've actually had more than one friend or partner be like, can't you just take my side for once? I'm like, but I can see both sides.
I know.
Because everybody's just a whole human. And so being able to support, and again, in those spaces of community, have a safe space to come if that boundaries conversation either goes well or doesn't go so well, to be held and reminded of the power that we do have inherent in us is a really beautiful piece of the work, for sure. And like, I am the first one to admit I am really good at boundaries with everybody but my partner, my intimate partner. So very much still a work in progress for myself too.
Yeah, thanks for being honest about that. I think we all have areas of our lives that things feel a little bit more streamlined and smooth, and areas where it's less established, right? And I think we also have people in our lives who have been with us through certain things that already kind of understand what our boundaries are, or maybe are a little bit fearful of crossing them. And so even if they don't quite understand them, they're careful, right? They kind of know what the gray area is and they try not to get into it. And then I think we have other people who are a little bit more like bulls in a china shop, right? And a little bit more, I don't want to use the term aggressive, but just like in your space and less aware and less cautious. And you know, maybe that's a personality type, but maybe it's just that they haven't been there with you yet and they don't know what that space is or how to respect it or how to honor it. Or maybe they've never encountered that space within themselves.
Yeah, I was going to say, so often it is that the folks who haven't done the inner work and or haven't learned how to set their own boundaries that are the most bull in a china shop about other people's boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think they're the ones who feel the most hurt too.
Yes.
Because
100%.
It triggers that side of them that is like, well, I'm not allowed to set that boundary, so why are you? Yeah. Whereas somebody who's accustomed to setting boundaries regularly, or at least has some kind of experience with it, when they receive a boundary, they tend, I think, to have this like level of acceptance that somebody else who has not done that just doesn't have yet.
Yeah. Remember a client that did a 6-week program with me who I haven't run this program for a while, but one of the weeks we were talking about boundaries. And when I told her that boundaries were kind, she laughed in my face and was like, what do you mean? And I asked her, how do you feel when somebody sets a boundary with you or says no to you? And she's like, I feel resentful because I do everything for everyone. And by the end of that 6 weeks, she had started practicing boundaries at home. Her child actually congratulated her and like was cheering her on, like, yes, set your boundaries.
I love that.
Because they had done their own work more so. And it was such a cool transition to see her go from this person who literally thought boundaries were mean to somebody who could embrace them and could practice them and recognize and celebrate other people setting them too.
You know, I think of boundaries as where I end and you begin, right? And so that's like, where do I need to take responsibility for myself and my space and my way of being? And where do I have no control over what you do, right? Where is that line? And that's kind of how I view them now. And I also view them as, like I said earlier, this boundaries let me love you safely. Yeah. And they let us have a relationship that is safe, right? They keep both people safe. But I can remember I hit my first really severe burnout, like hospitalization level burnout, when I was 15. And I can remember one of the people I was working with at the time talking to me about boundaries. And I was like, what the fuck is a boundary? Like, can someone just explain this to me in a way that I understand, right? And they kept talking to me about, Denise, you need to have more boundaries. You need to have better boundaries. But nobody could explain to me in a way that I understood what a boundary was. And so I'm 15 and I obviously didn't hit burnout by accident. You know, it was an accident, but I didn't get there. You know how you get there, right? Yeah. So obviously this doctor is recognizing that I needed to have better boundaries in my life so that I could avoid reaching this place again. And nobody could explain it to me in a way that I could understand. And I don't know when I actually started to really understand what a boundary was, but it was like way later in life than I would like to admit.
Oh yeah, I don't even think I really even heard the term until I was much older than 15. I was probably in my like it was not in actually it was when I was training to be a midwife. Actually, that's when it was, because they did reference it in school as we were preparing to embark on this very emotional, labor intensive career, that you needed to have good boundaries around work and, you know, clients and school and all that. And then they proceeded to punish us when we did try to enact those boundaries.
Well, and that's exactly society, right? Like that's like a really good metaphor for the society that we're living in and kind of brings us full circle in this conversation to how it started, right? That
Hmm.
society is really forcing us in this direction and in this way of being and in these beliefs that force us into this fast-paced, productive equals self-worth style of living. So
Hmm.
how did you, I know that you weren't born cyclical living, right?
No.
So, yeah. So what was that like for you? You know, I know that you have a bit of a two-pronged kind of journey that really
Hmm.
brought you to where you are.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it's the topic of boundaries and self-worth that are the first kind of prong of my journey. And that was leaving a relationship that was not healthy for me, in which it wasn't until actually, I think it was last year that I finally looked at it and I was like, it took me so long to leave because I thought his happiness trumped my own. Like if I had said that out loud, I wouldn't have agreed with it at the time, but like clearly that's what was going on. I wasn't worthy of leaving because that would hurt him. And so my own unhappiness was tolerable because it meant that I was keeping him from that hurt of me leaving, which is a boundaries thing in a lot of ways. And I've learned so much since then. And then the second prong of it was midwifery and the journey of being a midwife and coming up against this wall of burnout again. I had felt like I was approaching it while I was still partnered. Left the relationship, had like this resurgence of capacity because I was no longer in so much misalignment with myself, my own relationship with myself, and then hit another wall of burnout with COVID and just had no way to refill my cup. And it was this time where I was seeking something to fill this void, to fill whatever was missing. I knew I didn't want to be a midwife forever. I didn't have a clue what else I might do, but I stumbled upon pretty much a life coaching course through a friend who was sharing these really insightful blog posts about this course she was taking where she was learning about presence and mindfulness and savoring. I remember her writing this beautiful blog post about savoring her morning coffee. And I was like, I don't know what she's doing or taking or on, but I want some. And it turned out to be a life coaching course. I'd never even heard the term life coach at the time. And congruently at the same time, another midwifery friend had asked me if I knew this woman named Nadine, who was a retired midwife who was doing energy healing work. And I was like, I do. I don't really know what she's up to. It seems a little woo. It seems a little out there. And my colleague and I were crying in the cafeteria one morning after a long birth. And she's like, I think you should talk to her. Like, it set me on this path of like, okay, I need help. I need support. I need to find tools to help myself. That's a lot of what the life coaching was. And I need support from somebody who's been there. And so I started working with Nadine, who then I embarked on a year-long energy healers training program with her, not even believing in energy healing when I started. And the
I love
two
that.
kind of
I don't want to interject. Well, I do want to interject only because I love what you just said because so many healers that I speak to are like, "Oh yeah, I got started because of this own chaos in my life and I didn't even believe in it for my like at the time." And
yeah.
I'm one of those people and a few of my other guests have been those people and I just think it brings this beautiful authenticity to the work that we're doing because it's not like oh, I just was meant to be a guru, you know?
Yeah.
Or like I had someone recently say to me, like, oh, yeah, you're like some kind of guru, right? And I was like, no, that's gross. Like,
Mm-mm,
no,
mm-mm.
that's not how I would refer to myself. And yeah, so thanks for sharing that that was not a natural progression for you, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I really I remember very vividly the very first kind of weekend intensive being like, well, I'm making shit up in my head, but this is fine. All I knew was I needed something and I wanted to be in her presence and I wanted to learn from her. And I knew she had wisdom beyond just this kind of very out there for me at the time concept of energy healing work. I love that you said, I'm not a guru. I open every course, every class, every intro I give. I always say, I'm a guide, not a guru. And that kind of journey of going from atheism, very staunch, everything is science, cold, hard fact, rational intellect only, to being an animist, where it's like everything is ensouled, the world is ensouled, my emotions and my intuition are valid. And
Yeah.
I'm learning how to listen to them and bringing those along for the ride. And so that really is my journey with those courses. Within a few months of being finished both of them, I was like, oh, I think this is my exit strategy. And cyclical living just kind of came in during that time. It wasn't even through Nadine and that wild medicine healers training course. She didn't speak to the wheel of the year specifically, but it was coming into my awareness. We did celebrate the solstices and the equinoxes, and the encouragement from her to start before I was ready. The very first thing I did was hold a ceremony for the summer solstice, and it was just online.
That was my first thing too. Amazing. Yeah, and it was in my living room, like my first one ever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I was online only. It was $10. I was so nervous. I was in my upstairs office space, and from then I haven't missed one since. It's been the backbone. And so for me, cyclical living became the foundation for everything else as I started to weave it in. And sometimes it was literally, I would cyclical live for that one day where I was celebrating, and then everything would go out the window and I'd get caught right back up in the hustle and the rat race. But the more I do it, the more I practice, the more years that I am in this space where that's what I talk about and speak about, the easier it gets to stay there.
Yeah. That's so beautiful. I'd love to say that I haven't missed one since, but I definitely have. My first one was probably 8 years ago or so. I'm guessing, but I think it was like something like 6, 7, 8 years ago, somewhere in that time frame. And yeah, it was like the same thing. It was like $10 or $20 and it was in my living room and it was beautiful. Like I made these, tea rituals and I had all of this, things that you can only do in person.
Yeah.
And I haven't missed one since for myself. Right. So, and I had been doing them for myself for many years before that, before finally getting the courage to do one for others. And then it wasn't until, so that was like my first and only one. And then it wasn't until a couple of years ago that again, it was the summer solstice and another local healer and I paired up and we started our monthly groups. And we did that for a year and a half or so and just put them on hold. So yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, I've often said, I hold them for others so that I'll do them for myself. I know that I am externally motivated. And so if I'm accountable to others, I'll do the thing.
I've been doing them online recently through pre-recorded content.
Oh, yeah.
And what I really like about that is that it gives me the flexibility with my family and my health and everything to record it at the time that works for me. It gives the people watching it the flexibility to participate at home in their own way, in their own time, right? They're not bound by bedtime schedules and whatever, having to show up at a certain time, right? For parents or people living with chronic illness or anything, just busy lives, right? And then what I've been doing is I've been watching my own.
Oh, amazing.
Like when it comes to the, and I'm kind of loving it. It's really strange.
Yeah.
But it really helps me to tune back in. And it's this bizarre witnessing of myself while also participating in the rituals and in the meditations and in the practices that I have channeled for the viewers. And yeah, it's really been an interesting.
That's so neat. Yeah, I love that idea. I record mine. There are always a few people who sign up who aren't able to attend live. And so they're always recorded for those who can't come, and hybrid, as I said. So there is that sense of connection and it is interesting. I might need to go back and watch my recordings because it is hard to drop in and participate in the same way when you're the one holding the space.
Exactly. That's exactly what I thought when you said, oh, I do this for others so that I'll make sure I do it for myself. On the one hand, I fully agree. And on the other, I think, wow, when I'm in that role of space holder, I am in that role of space holder. And I'm sure you are too, right? It's very different than dropping in for ourselves. So yeah, it's been really interesting being able to go back and just go through my own meditations that is my voice. And at first I was like,
Yeah.
this is too weird. I don't know if I like this, but eventually it has become this nice thing where I can drop in and access that wisdom for myself instead of that energy of just channeling it through for another.
Yeah.
And same with some of my card readings and stuff that come up within these ceremonies. I get to, instead of being on the side of the reader and that having that detachment from outcome, I can come in as the receiver and
Mm-hmm.
be able to receive those messages in a different way, because as I'm channeling them, I'm detached from that outcome and from needing to know what this means for whoever, right? Because
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
for me. But then if I feel later that it is for me and I can come back in, then I can really receive it on a different level. So yeah, it's really interesting. It's been a really interesting process.
Yeah. I love that. I have several meditations or visualizations up on Insight Timer, and I've heard them all back because I've edited them, but I've never thought to sit down and listen to them and like participate in them too. So that's
Editing
now
day
I
is my
want to.
favorite day because I I don't really edit my meditations much. Like I'll play them back to make sure that everything is, that there's nothing like really out of whack or
Yeah.
that the sound didn't work or something, right? But for the most part, I'm channeling them through. So I'm not really
Mm-hmm.
editing them because I want that energy to come through.
Mm-hmm.
So when I edit, I put on my headphones and I sit back and I just like take it in.
Mm-hmm.
And if anything stands out, obviously, if an audio cut out or something, I could
Mm-hmm.
still pick that up. But yeah, it's editing day is my favorite day
Yeah.
for that
Yeah.
reason.
Yeah, it is. I think the most editing I do is usually adding silence where I'm like, oh, there could be more pause here because that's
Yeah.
the one place that often when you're speaking into a microphone alone, the pauses
That's
could be
for, I
longer.
think, most people,
Yeah.
right? I remember one of my teachers telling me, I'm always faster than I think I am. Like for
Yeah.
her, she's been doing this for, decades. And she's like, I'm always faster than I think I am. And so
Yeah.
I've always kind of carried that with me. Like, don't feel like you have to speed up, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm often offering energy healing throughout my meditations, and that really slows me down
Mm-hmm.
because now I'm pausing because I'm actually working with the field and then I'm coming back to it. So that's helped
Mm-hmm.
me in that way a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So we just touched on how like neither of us really aligns with the word guru. You know where this is going. I know that you refer to yourself as a witch, as a slow living witch. And I'd love to hear kind of your interpretation of the word witch, because that is not a word that is taken kindly by a lot of our society.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, and you know, that it is not what our patriarchal society has kind of like deemed it to be. But it's funny, even though I know that and I align with, I've read books on it that are so powerful and speak to me so heavily and align for me so much, but I still feel uncomfortable with like the label of a witch. And I know I was sharing with you when we first talked about this that my partner, when I first met my partner, he was just referring to me as the witch. And I didn't really know that, right? Like, I didn't know that that was happening outside of like our conversations, our private conversations. And then I find out that he's like, at work and his buddies are like, oh, how's the witch? How's things with the witch or whatever. And like, they didn't even know my name. Like, they just knew me as like the witch, and his family too. Like, that's how he, I guess, would, oh no, I'm hanging out with this person and she's a witch. And he meant it like endearing, but I was like mortified. Like, this is
Yeah.
how I'm walking into this situation now, that everybody just views me this way. And I'm so acutely aware of the fact that the majority of people don't understand the word witch in the way that like you or I would,
Yeah.
that I was like, man, talk about like coming out of the broom closet. Like, you're just right? No time. And I wasn't always so forthcoming with my lifestyle.
Mhm.
right? Because it doesn't align with how I was raised. It doesn't align with my family of origin. So that was something that at the time I kept a little bit closer to the chest. You know what I mean? It certainly
Right.
wasn't like a secret. Obviously, he knew enough about me to know that this was how I lived. But
Yeah.
yeah, it wasn't how I introduced myself, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting word. I think probably, I mean, I have a story around how I claimed the title, and I'll share what I mean by which. I'm just sitting here thinking I probably came to it a bit more easily because I was a midwife, and we're kind of the original witches, you know. And there's this history for me. If I think about my family of origin, you know, my mom is definitely, I think she probably resonates, though she doesn't like the word. She definitely was like, could you use a different word, because that the connotations are stronger there. But my grandma was a public health nurse and a very independent woman, and wanted to be a midwife, and my mom dabbled with the idea of being a midwife. And so I think I have this really strong vein running through my family. But when I first decided to use the word to describe myself, I was unsure of it. I had a idea for a master class land in my head. The title came in like one of those downloads, if you want to use that coaching lingo,
Yeah.
of it was what was it called? A course, beginners, light witchcraft for the woo curious. That's what it was called, light witchcraft for the woo curious. And it was going to be like a 2-part masterclass. And when I shared it with my coach at the time, she asked me, would you consider yourself a witch? And I was like, well, I don't know. But she basically encouraged me to explore using that title because it's going to get some attention. And when I took it to Instagram to say, like, as we do in a story poll, you know, if I started using the term witch, would that surprise you? And 90% of people who answered this poll, I gave 3 options. One was, you don't already. One was, no, of course not. And the other was like, yeah, what do you mean? What's going on here? Almost everybody, with I think one exception, answered either like, you don't already, or no, I wouldn't be surprised. So there was this sense of like, I'm already being perceived this way, whether or not I'm using the term. And it really led me to delve into, well, what do I mean by that? And I have a little like tag at the bottom of my About Me page on my website that speaks to this word because of the number of older women who have been triggered by it and told me maybe I should use something different. And I say, you know, I could say wise woman, knowledge keeper, earth lover, community builder, energy healer, midwife, joy seeker, space holder, intuitive, circle keeper, equity, advocate, ally, defender. Or I could just say witch.
Yeah. I have shivers. Yeah, that's beautiful. I totally agree. And I love that book, Witch. The book called Witch, it made a big difference in my life in early on in kind of this path for me.
Mm-hmm.
I have since learned of some past life trauma that I have around being a witch. Like I have a few different, I've done lots of past life regressions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not in all of them, obviously, but in a few of them, I came through as a witch, and it's always this traumatic ending, right? It's always this like being burned at the stake, being shot, being drowned, being, you know, by people who are in my life today, like in very close roles in my life today. About as close of a role as you could get, you know? And so I definitely carry a lot of that witch wound energy into my life today. And it is something that I actively work on, and actually came up in an energy session just like a month ago again. So it is one of those pieces that I understand, and I honor, and I have this reverence for the nature of the witch and what that really means. And I have all of this wounding that kind of like keeps me at a distance from the language itself.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think all of us have some of that wounding. If we have any European ancestry, that witch wound is there, whether or not we were witches and persecuted, or we were simply women alive in the time when the witch trials were so rampant. There's a lot of ancestral trauma that gets carried through. I find it curious. And it took me some practice to say the word and to define myself that way, but not a lot. And I find that curious for me. I've done a little bit of past life regression, and I know that I have been persecuted in the past for being outspoken and whether a witch or a priestess. But there's this like stubborn streak in me that's like, screw you. I will be and do and say whatever I want.
Good for you.
That's like part of my incarnation this go around.
Yeah.
Part of my human design is my throat and my heart are both defined, and they're both connected, direct line. Like if I feel it and it's in my heart, I will speak it, and I might regret it later, but I'm not afraid to speak up. And I'm so thankful for that, because I think it's because we all share so much, and there are those of us who can share our stories and kind of forge that path for others to make it safe for others. In some areas of life, other people have done that for me. And so if I get to be the outspoken witch claiming that title, that makes it just a little bit safer for a sister witch to step into that identity and feel a bit safer about it, I'm here for it.
Yeah. Thank you. We need more people who just speak their truth, without fear of persecution. And I've done a lot of work. I am more like you in that way, in so many ways. And I've still had so much work to do around my throat and, like repetitive strep throat as a kid and that globus sensation for years.
I actually did also have that.
Yeah. So I resonate so much with what you're saying. And I'm also like acutely aware of how much work I've had to do to kind of get there. But I think that this comes through in so many different areas of our lives where each of us has something to say, and that thing is important, right? It's not going to be, wild woman medicine or witch medicine for every person, but it's going to be something. And I want to hear what that is from all people. Like if everybody could find the courage to speak their truth, I think it really does pave the way for others to feel safe to do the same. And not only that, I think if we're to bring this back into a very now world physical embodiment kind of way, I think that when we speak our truth, it protects other people. It keeps other people safe in some ways, right? Yeah. And I'm the same as you, where like what's in my heart really comes out. And throughout my life, I was always the person who was like advocating for the underdog. I was always the person who was, even as a child, like on the playground, standing up for the kid that was being taken advantage of or being hurt in some way, or who was just different. Right? And I think that those people need more people to speak up until they can, right? And for our children, like now I'm an adult and I'm a parent, and this just came up a week ago, that I was watching a podcast, and it was Dr. Gabor Mate, and he was saying, and I love him.
Yes, we do.
And yeah, I met him. I have a photo of us. He was at a conference back when I used to be a mental health advocate for child and youth mental health. So I've always had this voice in me. And anyways, this podcast, he was saying something along the lines of children who are sexually abused. One of the biggest factors is that abuser can like pinpoint which child is going to have somebody who is going to notice, who is going to protect them, who is going to speak up for them, and which children have somebody who's going to sweep it under the rug or not believe them, or doesn't have that connected relationship with their child to even find out in the first place. And we just had some family in town, so lots of discussions come up, right? And we're talking, and this came up, and I was saying, there's a lot of challenges that come to me for being as outspoken and bold as I can be at times, right? And there's some challenges that come with people knowing how bold I can be or how outspoken I can be in different circumstances. And I was like, but there is not a human who knows me that doesn't believe that I would burn this family down if something like that was to happen to my child.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Not a chance would I be sweeping something under the rug. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you think I'm too bold over, like, right? These like minor things.
Yeah.
Or semi minor things, or you think I'm too outspoken or too, standing in my truth or whatever, right? Like not fitting the narrative of that like woman who just stays quiet and who just sweeps things under the rug or avoids. And there are people in my life who think I'm just too direct and who think that I need to deal with things too head on that could just be kind of left.
That makes them uncomfortable.
Right? Yeah. And, maybe they're not always wrong. I'm not making like a judgment on whether they're right or not wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But what came up for me when I watched him say this was, if me being this way protects my child in that way, fuck it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't care who thinks I'm like too big, too bold, too loud, too outspoken, if it is going to protect my child in that way. Because I can guarantee that nobody who knows me would think anything different.
Yeah.
Besides, she will burn shit down.
Yeah.
To protect her child and to protect something like that. Like, there's not a chance I would like sweep that under the rug and then have my kid have to still go sit on uncle's lap or what, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think you're speaking to what's so much easier for so many of us is when it's not standing up for ourselves. It's standing up for someone else. Right. And so for me, the title of witch and claiming it and owning it and speaking about it, I don't feel like it's for me. I was like, I can stand up for somebody else's needs, their values. I can stand up for equity and liberation and freedom and justice and all of this. But to ask to have my needs met, that's harder.
Yep.
That's harder. And so it doesn't feel scary for me to claim the title of witch because I really don't feel, it's more like a fuck you to the patriarchy than it is a like, ooh, this is a scary persona to step into.
Yeah, I love
that. It feels
that.
bigger than me.
And it is bigger than you.
Yeah.
And so thank you.
Yeah.
For stepping into it for the rest of us.
Yeah.
I so agree with what you were saying, that like it's so much easier to stand up for somebody else than it is for ourselves. And that, you nailed it for me.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah.
So we're coming up on time, but I think I just am glancing at my notes and I would love to, bring this full circle and just to hear, what were the signs in your body that you were living out of alignment, that you were getting to burnout, that you needed to make a change, basically? What were the signs in your body that you needed to make a change?
Mm-hmm. So again, with my two-pronged story, with the relationship that I was in, my marriage, it was a sign that I ignored for a long time, and it was heartburn. And I remember the very first time I got heartburn, I was sitting on the couch after dinner and I didn't know what it was. I was like, what is this feeling? It's so painful. I'd never experienced it in my life. I had no clue. And my husband recognized it. His mom got heartburn. And so he got me some Gaviscon or whatever it was. And it started to happen occasionally, once in a while, every few months after dinner or whatever. And I was just like, I guess I'm getting older. And it started to happen more frequently. And I remember telling my mom, and my mom was like, I only get heartburn when I'm stressed. And I was like, I'm not stressed. I feel fine. And it got to the point where it was waking me up multiple times a week, 2, 3 a.m. And I would be in so much excruciating pain. I would be sitting up. I remember trying to sleep sitting up in an armchair because I couldn't lay down. My whole chest felt like it was on fire. And I ended up medicated. I was on a daily prescription medication for that heartburn. Still never made the connection that it was because I was so out of alignment until I ran out of my medication 2 or 3 days after I left my husband, I finally left, the culmination of all of the things. I decided enough was enough, and I was staying at my friend's house in her basement spare room, and I ran out of those meds, and the heartburn didn't come back.
Wow.
And gone. Like, I've experienced minor bouts a couple of times since, and every time I'm like, what's going on? Whole system stop, tune in, figure out what's wrong, because this is like a massive red flag now. But it was wild to go from that state to just overnight disappeared. Yeah. So that was the one. Now I know. Stress and heartache, literal heartburn. And with midwifery, it was bitterness and resentment and bone deep exhaustion. It was this feeling of, I remember getting a phone call and I had to go into the hospital to triage a client, and I knew I had somebody who was probably going to go into labor later that night, and this woman had called me at like 11 p.m. She'd waited all day before she called with this. She'd had food poisoning, and I was so upset. I screamed and I threw my phone across the room. I just hyperventilated myself to the hospital, crying. Thank goodness it was COVID. I had a mask and eye goggles, so like the nurses were maybe aware of the fact that I was red and blotchy, but my client was too out of it to know. And I just was like, something has to change, because bringing that energy into any kind of birthing space felt so wrong. It felt so wrong.
Yeah. Well, as somebody who had midwives, I want to say thank you for not only the work you did, but for leaving it. Like when you were in that, because exactly, to bring that kind of an energy into the space is, you're right, it's wrong.
Yeah. And I was always able, and I wouldn't have been able to continue being able to shift when it was a birth. I was always able to shift the magic and the energy of a birth space. Was everything else had to go out the window. I had to let go of it all at the door, but it was starting to get harder, and I was definitely bringing it into some other spaces, clinic spaces, home visit spaces sometimes, and it was time to shift. And I loved the work. I still love that work. I'm so passionate about it, and I had to leave.
Honoring choice, not just for you, but for everyone. Right? Like that could not have been an easy decision to make when you love something that much. And I really do believe that like most midwives, like they are there for the right reasons, like, or at least the ones I worked with were definitely there for the right right.
Yeah.
I obviously only have my experience with that, so I can't speak to everyone, but the midwives I worked with were fantastic and so deeply knowledgeable and so aware, and the work is so beautiful. I have a really deep reverence for the work when it's done well. But what an honoring and likely very, very hard choice for you to have had to make.
Yeah, it was scary. And I actually, 4 or 5 months ago now, I gave up my hospital privileges. I got to hold on to them. I could take a 2-year leave of absence, and I initially was like, well, I'm never coming back. I knew, and I held on, because it felt so scary to walk away. And for a lot, I've said to many people, if the apocalypse comes, I'll be a midwife again, no problem. Home birth, outside of the like legal coercive bullshit that happens in the hospital, even when you are with a midwife, there's this pressure and this really medicalized system that just is not in congruence with what birth is. That was what wore me down.
Yeah, you're not the first midwife that I've heard speak to that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being here, but also thank you for just being you, like for just showing up. I can tell just through how you're showing up in this space and through your words and how you speak and the language that you use. I can tell how you show up in other spaces too, to some degree. Do you know what I mean? And you just get that sense. And I just really appreciate your work in the world and how you're showing up and how you're walking through as this embodiment of your practices, and how that ripple effect is it must just be profound for the people who not only the people who come in contact with you, but the people who come into contact with them, right? Like it ripples out so far beyond what you or I will ever be able to see. And yeah, so thank you for stepping into your power in that way and for speaking so authentically.
Oh, thank you for seeing me. And I feel we're kindred spirits in so many ways. It feels like this conversation was just delightful.
Thank you. I agree. So I'd love to leave our listeners with some information about how to find you. I hate it when I listen to a really good conversation and then I never know how to find the person.
Yeah.
So I don't want to do that to our listeners. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have like a 6-week course that is run live, Unleash Your Inner Witch. Is that right?
Yes.
And you have a year-long mentorship program, Wise Wild Woman Mentorship Program.
Yeah.
And what I love about that one is that you can dip into that for a season or for the year, right? You don't have to be committed to that entire year-long program. You can kind of come in and out for what works for you.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And then you have 6-month coaching containers for one-on-one work if somebody really wants to dive deep with you in a more intimate way. And am I correct in thinking that all of those programs are for female identifying folks? Yeah. And then you have the Wheel of the Year ceremonies, and that's for anybody.
The Wheel of the Year ceremony is primarily for female identifying folks too. And actually, if there are male identifying folks who want to work one-on-one, that space, I am open to that for sure. The things that I speak about and the way that I attract, it tends to be women who come into my world. And I've had some really powerful coaching containers with men as well. I think there's a lot of space for men to be heard in safe spaces that they don't get to. But the ceremony piece, I'm so passionate about creating safe spaces for women to show up and be fully seen and heard and received. And so those spaces currently are for women and female identified folks.
Okay, perfect. I misunderstood there. So it is the one-on-one that you open up to men. Because I know you and I discussed that briefly, because I agree. I think that our world does not heal without men healing too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's such a crucial aspect. And some of that I think can be done in combined containers, and some of it I agree is like, female and male kind of containers. I think there's space for all of that.
For sure.
Yeah. And then I'm going to drop your socials, or at least your website, in the app. But do you want to share a little bit about how people can find you?
Yeah, for sure. So yes, my website is a great way because it's at myluminouslife.ca. And when you go to it, you'll get a lovely little pop-up inviting you to take my Which Witch Are You quiz. So if you're at all curious about what kind of witch you might be if you were a witch, that's a fun way to connect, and that gets you on my email list. And then I hang out over on Instagram at I am Eileen March. I'm on Insight Timer. If you search Eileen March, you can find my guided visualizations there. They're all free at the time of recording. It's not any of the paid paywall kind of Insight Timer stuff. And I have a podcast as well called the Woo Curious Podcast, which is fun, a fun way to get to know me even better.
Perfect. Thank you, Eileen. Thank you for being here, and thank you just for bringing your whole self to this space and for trusting me with that.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having the space to come to.
Thank you. As always, I am trusting you to take what resonates with you and leave the rest behind. Please be sure to hydrate and care for yourself well, as any of the energetic transmissions, meditations, or self-healing prompts integrate into your system in the coming days or weeks. As with all the work that I do, I ask that this aligns for the highest and best of everyone involved, and I trust that you will only receive that which is in true alignment for you at this time. If this resonated with you, I invite you to consider giving back through your likes, ratings, comments, shares, or subscribes, as those help so much on these platforms. If you're ready to go deeper than what these platforms can provide, I offer ceremonies, workshops, guided practices, and more at www.denisealyssa.com. I look forward to connecting with you there.